Hey, Dan here, just in my hotel in Valencia, heading back to Prague in a couple of hours here. And today's video topic came from a suggestion from Svetlana, who helps me with these videos, doing the thumbnails and all this stuff. And her suggestion for a topic was, are you introverted or just insecure or having low self-esteem? And Svetlana is not an expert in Myers-Briggs stuff or personality type at all. She's just kind of learning as she's going. But I thought it was actually a really interesting topic as a starting point because the testing for what your personality type is really, really bad. You've probably heard me talk about this before, where you go through the test, right, on, say, a website like 16personalities.com, and question is like, hey, would you rather go out and party or stay home and read a book? And it's like, is that really how you figure out if I'm introverted or extroverted? The way the questions are also worded tends to get at your actions recently, which can mean it's very affected by moods or phases or things like that. Now, you would hope that the paid professional test would be better, and actually somewhat recently, I did one of the more advanced, quite expensive tests, thinking, hey, I'm curious, like how this shows the results differently, how the test is done. Same problem. And actually, I recorded my answers because I knew it would type me as an ENTP because of how the questions were worded and how I answered. I even saved those questions and could see like the extra few percent. So it would ask questions like, what do you value more, logic or feelings? Well, what do I value more? I think intellectually, when I'm answering a test, I'm going to say I value logic. I value, rational choice more than emotions, which can change on a day-to-day basis. Like, should we build a society based on emotions or logic? And I'd probably say my intellectual answer is logic, but that's not how I make my own decisions, and that's not what drives me in my life, and yada, 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 right? So it was very interesting. There were 4 or 5 questions that I knew would skew the results, but I answered them as they asked them, and it was very clear to me, right? And so this is something to really keep in mind when you've maybe tested as a few different types. I'll often talk to someone who might test as an INFJ for years, and then they're like, actually, I'm an ENFP, or vice versa. And that can often be that you were in a period of a lot of stress. So you were reflecting your shadow side. You were coming out and not really being your normal self. Or the question about self-esteem is actually a really good one, because if you think about it, if you're not feeling great about yourself, or you're just more socially anxious, which is actually quite a common thing with ENFP, social anxiety, or even something like myself, you're, say, living in the Czech Republic where you don't speak the language and sometimes it's more nervous to go to a social situation. You might find that you're not really that keen in going to a party. But that doesn't mean I've suddenly become an introvert. It just means that there's other influences on my behavior. The same way someone who grows up with really rigid militaristic parents might actually be on time, pack really well, keep their bed made and room organized, but they could still be a P-type. But they had such rigid conditioning of how they're supposed to behave that they ultimately, adjust their behavior to fit that. But it doesn't get at who they are. So if you've ever had this experience of taking the test and showing up as a different thing and changing and, thinking, that you are changing, it's not. It's that we have our core type, but then we have all these other external influences that will change us. And for sure, something like self-esteem has a massive difference. When someone has low self-esteem, isn't feeling good about themselves, or has a lot of anxiety, it tremendously affects our behavior and changes how we act from what might be typical of a type in terms of like what you would read online or what you would expect to behave. But that doesn't mean your type is changing. If this is something you've dealt with and you're trying to figure out, One thing I recommend is doing the test with a friend or two who know you really well. And you answer the questions first and then sort of look at them and get their input. Like, is this how I behave? Is this how I am? And that can be a good indication. This was, for me, maybe about a year ago, maybe more, I came across this concept of like, are you type A or type B? Which, of course, I'd heard in mainstream circles, but I never really thought of it through to like a diagnosis. And I was like, I think I'm type B. Like, I'm pretty chill and, I go with the flow. I like to enjoy life. And I ran this by a few friends and family members, and everyone laughed. Like, everyone said 100% you are so type A. You cannot sit still. You love to get things done. You love to be busy. Kind of blind to myself. So that can be a great way to perhaps get a more accurate or at least a different perspective on the results of the test. And then, of course, there's the option of talking to someone who knows more about personality type, getting their feedback on it. Usually when I meet someone, and this isn't a service I really do, but when I meet someone casually and they're unsure of their type, or it's like an event, for instance, which actually, by the way, the tickets to Life Design Fiesta 2023 in Prague are on sale now. And for about the next day, there is the earliest super early bird pricing. And yeah, you can check that out. I'll put a card and a link to that there. And like at an event, if I'm talking to someone, I can usually ask a couple questions and get to their real type pretty easily. But the online tests are garbage. So just keep that in mind if you're confused with your type or have these different results come up. See you in the next video, which I will be filming from lovely Prague next week. Ciao.